They erupted in laughter before the partners when they called me the cheap appetizer of the business world. I set down my water glass, smiled, and decided if they wanted a proper CEO, like they'd always dreamed I'd become that person, but not for them. That night, the recording from the stage microphone fell into my hands. The next morning, I began my plan to reclaim everything they'd stolen using their own rules. The boardroom that had witnessed my humiliation would soon witness their downfall. My name is Ava Calloway, and I've spent my entire 34 years being the perfect daughter who was never quite perfect enough. That December evening at the Langford and Pike Capital Private Dining Room should have been my triumph. Instead, it became the match that lit the fuse. The crystal chandeliers cast diamonds of light across the mahogany table where Denver's medical tech elite gathered. I'd orchestrated this dinner for weeks, every place card positioned with surgical precision, every wine pairing calculated to impress. As Chief Operating Officer of North Bend Analytics, I'd delivered 47% growth in 18 months. The numbers should have spoken for themselves. Ava handles the day-to-day operations beautifully, my mother Elaine announced to Marcus Langford, her manicured fingers wrapped around a glass of Chateau Margaux, though she lacks that certain executive presence required for true leadership. The words sliced through the warm buzz of conversation. I maintained my smile, the one I'd perfected in countless boardrooms, while my father Gerald chuckled from across the table. "We're grooming Brendan for the CEO transition," Gerald added, clapping my brother's shoulder. "The board responds better to masculine authority. Ava understands her role as the operational backbone someone needs to handle the spreadsheets while visionaries shape the future." Brendan, who'd joined the company 6 months ago with a title larger than his contributions, leaned forward. "Ava's brilliant with KPIs and process optimization, but strategic vision that requires a different chromosome." Laughter rippled through the room. Marcus Langford's eyes assessed me like I was a line item on a balance sheet, finding me wanting. His partner, Diana Pike, actually took notes. "We're specifically interested in leadership continuity," Langford said, directing his words to my parents, not me. "Our firm values traditional governance structures. The recent push for diverse leadership often compromises performance." I reached for my water glass, my movements deliberate and calm. The weight of every slight, every dismissed achievement, every stolen credit crystallized in that moment. As I set the glass down, I noticed something: the small wireless microphone clipped to the centerpiece, part of the venue's recording system for corporate events. Tom, the AV technician I'd helped secure a promotion last year, caught my eye from the corner. He tapped his tablet twice and mouthed, "Recording everything." "Perhaps we should discuss the Q3 Asian market expansion," I suggested, my voice steady as granite, "the one I personally negotiated in Singapore." "That was a team effort," Elaine corrected sharply. "Brendan provided crucial oversight." Brendan hadn't even been employed then, but truth had never been currency at the Calloway family table. Diana Pike shifted forward. "We need assurance that North Bend's leadership will remain stable. The healthcare analytics sector demands a certain gravitas. You have our word." Gerald responded immediately. "By next quarter, Brendan will assume the CEO role. Ava will continue supporting from her operational position. It's where she excels." They were trading my future like a commodity, packaging my humiliation as a business proposition. Every sacrifice I'd made, every 16-hour day, every innovation I'd driven reduced to a punchline about chromosomes and spreadsheets. I stood, my chair sliding back silently on the thick carpet. "If you'll excuse me, I need to make a call to our Singapore partners, the ones who refuse to speak to anyone except me." "Always working," Elaine said to the table with false affection, though sometimes I wonder if she focuses on work to avoid addressing her interpersonal shortcomings. I paused at the door, turned back to face them all. The photographer my parents had hired was capturing the moment, and I looked directly into his lens. My smile was perfect, the kind that would photograph beautifully but carried winter in its edges. "Enjoy your evening," I said. "And please, continue planning my future without me," I'm sure you know best. The door closed behind me with a whisper. In the hallway, Tom was already approaching with his tablet. Ms. Calloway, I have the entire dinner recorded. Every word. I took the tablet, watched 30 seconds of my parents auctioning off my career, and handed it back. Send me everything, and Tom include the timestamp markers. Already done. After what you did for me last year? This is the least I could do. I walked toward the exit, my heels striking marble in measured beats. Behind me, laughter spilled from the private dining room, my family celebrating their successful performance of diminishing their daughter. They wanted a CEO who fit their vision. They were about to discover exactly what kind of CEO I could become. The drive home from the Langford and Pike dinner took 23 minutes. I spent each one cataloging wounds I'd pretended didn't exist. My Denver penthouse was dark except for the city lights bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows, and I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey before opening my laptop. The emails stretched back years, a digital archaeology of diminishment. Gerald's message to board members after I'd secured our first major hospital system. The team, led by Brendan's strategic vision, has delivered exceptional results. Brendan had been in Cabo that week. Elaine's response to my Stanford MBA graduation. At least one of our children finished their education, though graduate degrees are often compensation for other deficiencies. I'd saved them all, telling myself they were motivation. Now I recognized them as evidence. At 3:45 a.m., I found the video from my 16th birthday. The local business journal had featured our family, Denver's medical investment dynasty. In the footage, Gerald spoke for 12 minutes about Brendan's potential, his natural leadership, his inheritance of the Calloway vision. About me, Ava helps with the books. I'd just won the state mathematics championship. My phone buzzed. Tom had sent the complete recording from tonight's dinner, along with something else email threads between my parents and Victoria Ames, their PR consultant, dated 3 weeks ago. They'd been planning this ambush, scripting my humiliation down to Brendan's chromosome joke. I opened my financial folders, the ones I'd been building since joining North Bend, my equity vesting schedule, the ESOP provisions I'd negotiated, the personal accounts I'd carefully separated from anything touching family money. Gerald had taught me one useful thing: never let emotion cloud financial strategy. He just hadn't expected me to apply that lesson against him. The memory surfaced uninvited age 7, showing him my perfect report card. Perfection is expected, not celebrated, he'd said, then spent an hour calling his golf buddies about Brendan making the junior league team. Age 14, when I'd built a predictive model for patient readmission rates. Elaine had used it in her presentation to investors, crediting it to family brainstorming while introducing Brendan as the future of healthcare innovation. I pulled up the corporate structure documents. North Bend Analytics wasn't just any company. I'd built its operational infrastructure from scratch, created the algorithms that powered our competitive advantage, established relationships with every major client. They could give Brendan the title, but they couldn't transfer my institutional knowledge. My reflection in the dark window looked different somehow, not broken or bitter clarified. They'd created me, shaped me with their impossible standards and casual cruelties, never realizing they were forging exactly the weapon that would destroy their carefully constructed narrative. I started a new document, Strategic Transition Plan. Not for them, for me. First, financial independence. I'd exercise my vested options immediately, liquidate what I could without triggering suspicion. The family trust had tentacles everywhere, but I'd learned corporate law from the best predators in the business. Second, operational insurance. Every critical system at North Bend ran through processes I'd designed. I wouldn't sabotage that was beneath me and legally dangerous. But I could document everything, create redundancies they didn't know about, establish fail-safes that only I could navigate. Third, alliance building. Tomorrow, I'd reach out to Tessa Monroe, our CTO who'd been passed over for promotion twice despite her brilliance, Dr. Marisol Hart, who'd complained about the Old Boys Club of Medical Tech, Noah Reyes, the M&A lawyer who'd whispered warnings about irregularities in our family funds dealings, The whiskey burned, but less than the memory of their laughter. Every slight had been a lesson. Every public humiliation, a tutorial in their weaknesses. They'd taught me to be perfect, never realizing perfection included perfect recall of every wound inflicted. I closed the laptop at 5:15, sunrise painting the mountains pink beyond my windows. Somewhere across the city, my parents were probably sleeping soundly, confident they'd secured their legacy through Brendan. They didn't understand what they'd done. You don't announce someone's execution at dinner, then expect them to show up for work Monday with a smile. You don't spend 34 years crushing someone's spirit and expect gratitude when you hand the ruins to their mediocre brother. I texted my assistant, "Clear my calendar for tomorrow morning. I have some personal business to handle." Then I opened a new message to Noah Reyes. "I need a consultation about corporate governance and fiduciary duty. Specifically, what constitutes breach of duty by board members with conflicting interests?" Breakfast at 7. His response came immediately. "I was wondering when you'd finally fight back. 7 works." The city woke below me, and I stood at the window, watching Denver come alive. Gerald and Elaine Calloway had given me everything: their ambition, their ruthlessness, their education and power. They just hadn't meant to give me targets painted on their backs. Tonight's humiliation was meant to break me. Instead, it had freed me. No more pretending we were a family. No more hoping for approval that would never come. They wanted a CEO. They were about to learn the difference between wanting and controlling. The Highland Brew coffee shop at 650 A.M. was nearly empty, which is why Noah Reyes had suggested it. He was already waiting in the corner booth, 3 folders spread across the table like a war map. His expression when I sat down told me he'd already pulled the corporate filings. Drag-along provisions, side letters, and a web of related party transactions. He said without preamble, "Your parents have been busy. But first, are you absolutely certain you want to open this door?" "The door's already open. They kicked it in at dinner last night." He slid a tablet across the table. "Then let's talk about ammunition. Your family fund has been structuring deals with Langford and Pike that violate at least 3 fiduciary standards. The question is whether you want to wound or kill." "I want to win." My phone buzzed. "Tessa Monroe. Coffee. I have something you need to see about our AI module." I texted back, "Meet me at the North Bend lab at 9. Bring your laptop and your NDA files." Noah was already drafting something on his legal pad. "Here's what you're up against. They've got side letters with 3 minority shareholders that trigger if you're deemed operationally unstable. The definition is conveniently vague, but every contract has a weakness, which is the IP assignments. You personally hold patents on 7 core algorithms. They're licensed to North Bend, not assigned. If you form a new entity and relicance exclusively through that structure, you control the revenue stream." The pieces were clicking together like code compiling. "And if that entity has different governance requirements, then North Bend either accepts your terms or loses its competitive advantage." He smiled, sharp as a blade. "Your parents taught you well, too well." At 9 sharp, I met Tessa in the North Bend lab. She'd commandeered the conference room, her screens showing data flows I recognized as our newest clinical noise reduction system. "I've been refining this independently," she said, pulling up commit logs. "Every improvement, documented outside company servers. If someone wanted to, hypothetically, spin this into a separate entity, they'd have clean ownership of the enhancements." "Hypothetically?" "Very hypothetically." She turned to face me. "Brendan took credit for my work in the board presentation last month. Your mother called me support staff to investors. I'm done being furniture. What do you need? CTO equity in whatever you're building. And I want my name on the patents this time." "Done." Dr. Marisol Hart answered on the second ring when I called from my office. "I wondered when you'd reach out. The entire Denver medical community is talking about last night's dinner." "Already." Victoria Ames sent a press release about Brendan's upcoming CEO appointment, posted it at midnight. I could hear her disgust through the phone. "I have 14 hospital systems in my network. Ava, they contract with North Bend because of the algorithms you built, not because of your brother's golf handicap." If those algorithms were available through a different structure, then I'd be very interested in the terms, especially if that structure had actual diversity in leadership instead of just marketing speak. By noon, I'd assembled the skeleton of something new. Tessa would refine our core technology under a new patent structure. Noah would create the legal framework, a Delaware C Corp with poison pills against hostile takeover. Dr. Hart would provide the market validation through letters of intent from her hospital network. Ivy Brooks from compliance was my last call. She picked up immediately. "I've been documenting irregularities for 6 months," she said before I could speak. "Your father had me sign an NDA, but NDAs don't cover whistleblower provisions for securities fraud." "What kind of irregularities?" "Pay-to-play schemes with city contracts. Your parents fund investing in companies that mysteriously win North Bend contracts. Board minutes that don't match actual decisions. I have copies of everything, encrypted and off-site." The rage I'd been converting to strategy flickered hot for a moment. They weren't just cruel, they were corrupt. "Ivy, would you consider a chief compliance officer role in a new venture, with actual autonomy and a real budget, complete autonomy and equity? Send me the terms." I spent the afternoon in my office, door locked, blueprinting a new structure they couldn't touch. Vigilant Care Systems incorporated in Delaware, IP agreements drafted, founding team identified. We wouldn't steal from North Bend, we didn't need to. We'd simply offer a better alternative with technology they couldn't access. My assistant knocked at 4:30 p. "M. Your mother's on line 1. Says it's urgent." I let it ring through to voicemail, then played it on speaker. "Ava, we need to discuss your behavior last night. Leaving abruptly sent the wrong message to important partners. Your father and I expect you at dinner tonight, 7 o'clock at the house. We'll discuss your transition to a more suitable role." I deleted the message and texted Noah. "How quickly can we file incorporation papers? 24 hours if we expedite? Faster if you know someone." I knew someone. Tom from AV had a brother at the Secretary of State's office. By 6 p. Instead of heading to my parents' house for their mandated humiliation session, I was sitting in Tessa's home office, reviewing code commits and patent applications. Every line of innovation they'd credited to Brendan, every breakthrough they'd minimized as operational details, we documented it all. "You know they'll come after you," Tessa said, pushing her glasses up. "The Callaways don't lose gracefully. They already came after me. They just didn't realize they were teaching me how to fight back." My phone had 17 missed calls from family numbers. I turned it to silent and opened a new document. Vigilant Care Systems disrupting healthcare analytics through authentic innovation. Let them plan their kingdom succession. I was building a revolution. Victoria Ames moved fast. By Tuesday morning, the narrative was everywhere. Denver Business Chronicle, MedTech Weekly, even a mention in the Wall Street Journal's digital edition. North Bend Analytics prepares leadership transition. Brendan Callaway to assume CEO role amid operational concerns. The operational concerns were, apparently, me. I sat in my office at 7:15 a.m., reading the hit piece while Ivy stood beside me, her compliance folders spread across my desk. "Look at this phrasing," she pointed to a paragraph. "Sources close to the situation report emotional instability in current operations leadership, with erratic decision-making that has concerned board members. They're building a paper trail to trigger the side letters." My email pinged. An invitation to appear on the Health Tech Horizons podcast, the same one that had run an anonymous insider segment yesterday claiming I'd had a breakdown during strategic planning. "Perfect," I said, forwarding it to Tessa. "We're going to accept—" "Are you insane? That's exactly what they want." "No, they want me to hide or explode. We're doing neither." Within 2 hours, Tessa and I had compiled something beautiful, a technical white paper on our clinical data noise reduction algorithm, complete with verification from Dr. Hart's pilot program, 28% reduction in diagnostic reporting errors, 41% faster processing time, real numbers from real implementations. The podcast host, Marcus Chen, No relation to anyone in this story, looked surprised when I walked into his studio at 2 p.m., calm and carrying a presentation folder instead of the emotional wreckage he'd been primed to expect. Ms. Calloway, thank you for joining us. There's been significant discussion about North Bend's leadership transition. I'm here to discuss innovation in healthcare analytics, I interrupted smoothly. Specifically, our breakthrough in clinical noise reduction that's revolutionizing diagnostic accuracy. But surely you want to address the rumors? What rumors that I'm focused on delivering measurable patient outcomes instead of golf course networking? I pulled out the white paper. Let's talk about what matters. This algorithm has prevented approximately 300 misdiagnoses in our pilot program alone. For 20 minutes, I talked pure technology and results. Every time Marcus tried to steer toward corporate drama, I had another data point, another verification letter, another peer review citation. Tessa had armed me with unassailable facts. Your family's fund has been instrumental in North Bend's growth. The technology has been instrumental. My team's innovations have delivered 800% ROI to our hospital partners. Would you like to see the case studies? The interview ended with Marcus looking defeated. He'd been fed a story about an unstable executive. Instead, he got a masterclass in technical leadership. But Victoria wasn't done. That evening, a leaked internal memo surfaced on industry blogs, supposedly from concerned North Bend employees about my aggressive management style and inability to collaborate with stakeholder vision. I was reading it in my home office when Noah called. They're escalating faster than expected. The board meeting has been moved up to next Monday. 4 days. Your father filed an emergency governance review, claims there's risk to shareholder value. I pulled up our incorporation documents for Vigilant Care Systems. How's our timeline? Papers file tomorrow. But Ava, without revenue or contracts, it's just a shell. Not for long. I conferenced in Dr. Hart. Marisol, how many of your hospitals would sign letters of intent for a better solution? After seeing your pilot data, 7 confirmed, maybe 10. I need them by Friday. Done. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I crafted our counterstrike. Not emotional, not defensive surgical. I compiled every email where Brendan had claimed credit for my work, every board minute where my innovations were reattributed, every financial report showing my algorithms driving revenue. At 3:20 a.m., Tessa texted, "Check your email." She'd sent something magnificent, a complete technical analysis showing that without our specific IP, North Bend's competitive advantage evaporated. She'd even built a projection model without the algorithms I'd developed, and she'd refined. North Bend would lose 60% of its market value within 18 months. Wednesday morning brought another Victoria Ames special and op-ed about the importance of stable leadership in healthcare technology. It featured a photo of Brendan at a charity gala, looking executive in his inherited confidence. I responded by publishing our white paper on LinkedIn. No commentary, no drama, just proud to share our team's breakthrough in clinical diagnostic accuracy. Within 6 hours, it had 4,000 views and 300 shares from hospital administrators. The podcast episode aired that afternoon. Marcus had edited it fairly, probably because he realized he'd been played by Victoria. The comment section exploded with actual healthcare professionals asking for technical details, partnership opportunities, implementation timelines. Gerald called my office at 4 p.m. I let him go to voicemail. This performance needs to stop. Ava, you're embarrassing the family and damaging our interests. Monday's board meeting will proceed with or without your cooperation. I texted my team, Friday, 10 a.m., my office, bring everything. Thursday, Victoria made her biggest mistake. She arranged for Brendan to appear on Denver Morning Business to discuss his vision for North Bend's future. He sat there in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, using words like synergy and paradigm shift while unable to answer a single technical question about our actual products. Mr. Calloway, can you explain the algorithm behind your diagnostic accuracy improvements? Well, that's really more of an operational detail. As CEO, I'll be focused on strategic vision. The interviewer, who'd clearly done her homework, pressed harder. But these algorithms are your core product. Surely you understand what you're selling? Brendan's pause lasted 4 seconds an eternity on live television. My team handles those specifics. Leadership is about delegation. I screenshot the moment his facade cracked, saved it to a folder labeled Evidence, and sent a single slide to the podcast producer, the interviewer, and every healthcare journalist in my contacts. One graph. North Bend's revenue mapped directly against my algorithm deployments. Every spike tied to something I'd built. The correlation was perfect. The subject line, "Data speaks louder than vision." By evening, "Data speaks louder" was trending in healthcare technology circles. Victoria's final volley came Friday morning, a carefully placed concern about my mental health from an anonymous board member in the Denver Post. I didn't respond. I was too busy signing letters of intent worth $32 million in potential revenue for Vigilant Care Systems, our company that had been incorporated exactly 6 hours earlier. The war was on, but they'd already lost. They just didn't know it yet. Ivy Brooks had the expression of someone who'd discovered a corpse in the basement. She spread 3 documents across my desk at 8:30 a.m. Friday morning, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she'd found. "The term sheet from August," she said, pointing to the first document. "Your father negotiated drag-along rights with minority shareholders, but look at the trigger clause." I read it twice to be sure I understood. If the CEO is deemed operationally unfit by a simple majority of Class B shareholders, your parents control 40% of Class B, they only need 11% more to force a sale. And guess who bought 15% of Class B shares through a shell company last month? The second document answered that question. Langford and Pike Capital, using a Delaware LLC called Medical Innovation Partners. That's illegal. They're on opposite sides of a potential transaction. Only if someone can prove they coordinated. Ivy pulled out the third document, which is why this email from Victoria Ames to both parties is so interesting. The email was time-stamped 3 weeks before the dinner. Subject line, "Project Succession, Timeline Alignment." Victoria, following our discussion, confirming the sequencing. 1. Public narrative establishment re-operational instability. 2. Emergency board review triggering drag-along provisions. 3. L&P acquisition offer at 30% below market. 4. Brendan installed as ceremonial CEO post-acquisition. Gerald and Elaine maintain advisory board positions with substantial exit bonuses. I sat back, the full scope of their betrayal crystallizing. They weren't just replacing me, they were selling out every employee, every shareholder, everyone who'd built North Bend alongside me. And they were doing it for a payday and their son's ego. "There's more," Ivy said quietly. The whistleblower hotline received 3 complaints about financial irregularities, all anonymous, all submitted right before keyboard votes. I traced the IP addresses. Victoria, your mother, from her home computer. The rage that flooded through me was ice cold and precise. Elaine had been manufacturing crises to justify her predetermined outcome. Noah arrived at 9, looking grim. "I've been researching precedent. The drag-along is enforceable unless we can prove bad faith coordination, but that email is smoking gun evidence if we can verify its authenticity." "It's authenticated," Ivy said. "I have the full headers and metadata. Plus, Victoria's assistant forwarded it to me by accident 6 months ago. She recalled it, but I'd already saved a copy. Why didn't you?" "Because I needed to know how deep this went, and because I wanted to give you the chance to handle this your way." She looked at me steadily. "You've always treated support staff with respect. That bought you something your parents never understood: loyalty." Tessa burst in at 9:15, laptop in hand. "We have a problem. Someone's been accessing our code repository overnight. Advanced algorithmic sections, the ones I've been refining. Brendan. His credentials, but the access patterns are wrong, too sophisticated." She pulled up logs. "Whoever this is actually understands the code." Noah's phone rang. He listened, his face hardening. That was my contact at the Secretary of State. Someone's filed an injunction to block Vigilant Care Systems Incorporation. On what grounds? Theft of intellectual property. They claim you're stealing North Bend's algorithms. The pieces clicked together. They were trying to trap me, make me look like a thief while they executed their sale. But they'd made a crucial error. Tessa, can you prove the algorithm improvements were made on your own time, with your own resources? Every commit, every timestamp, every iteration. I've been paranoid about documentation for 2 years. Ivy, how quickly can you compile a formal complaint about the governance violations? Give me 2 hours. Noah, I need you to file something with the Delaware Chancery Court, not defensive offensive. We're seeking an emergency injunction against the board meeting Monday. On what basis? I pulled out the recording Tom had given me from the dinner. Board members conspiring to devalue the company for personal gain. We have the audio, the emails, and now evidence of IP theft using Brendan's credentials. The room went quiet as they absorbed the implications. You're going nuclear, Noah said finally. They already did. They just thought I'd be too emotional to fight back strategically. I stood, looking at each of them. By Monday morning, every major shareholder will have a package documenting the conspiracy to devalue North Bend for a cheap acquisition. Every healthcare journalist will have the full email chain. The SEC will have Ivy's whistleblower complaint. Your family, Tessa started, stopped being my family the moment they put a price tag on my career. I pulled up my contact list. Dr. Hart has 10 hospitals ready to sign with Vigilant. We file our response to the injunction with those LOIs attached. Let them explain to shareholders why they're blocking a partnership worth $32 million in revenue. My phone buzzed. Gerald, your absence from family meetings has been noted. Monday's board vote will proceed. Consider your future carefully. I typed back, I am. See you Monday. Then I added one more message. Check your email in 1 hour. Noah looked at me. What are you sending him? Nothing. Let him sweat. Let them all wonder what I know, what I have, what I'm planning. I smiled, sharp as winter. They taught me that anticipation is half the weapon. Ivy stood, gathering her documents. I'll have the SEC complaint ready by noon. Ava, they're going to come at you with everything. Good. Let them show everyone who they really are. As my team dispersed to prepare our counterstrike, I stood at my office window, looking out at the Denver skyline. Somewhere in this city, my parents were probably meeting with Victoria, confident in their plan to sacrifice me for profit. Monday would arrive like a reckoning. They thought they were conducting an execution. They were actually attending their own funeral. The real CEO they'd always wanted. She was about to show them exactly what that looked like. The incorporation papers for Vigilant Care Systems were filed at 11:43 a.m. Friday. By 2 p.m., we had a Delaware C Corp with an airtight structure that my parents couldn't touch. The poison pills Noah had embedded were works of art. Any hostile takeover attempt would trigger automatic dilution that would make acquisition impossibly expensive. The beauty is in the IP structure, Noah explained as we sat in Tessa's lab, reviewing the contracts. Vigilant exclusively licenses its improvements back to North Bend, but only under specific governance conditions. If those conditions are breached, say, by a forced sale under questionable circumstances, the license terminates immediately. Tessa pulled up her code repository. I've isolated every enhancement I've made in the past 18 months. Without these improvements, North Bend's accuracy drops by 43%. They'd be selling a shell of what the company was. Dr. Hart called in on speaker. I've got something better. 12 hospitals, not 10. And they're willing to put penalties in the contracts if we don't deliver. That's how confident they are in your technology. Penalties, Ivy asked. $2 million per hospital if we fail to meet performance metrics. But Ava's algorithms have never missed a target. I could hear Marisol's smile. I'm also having each hospital CEO send a letter to North Bend's board expressing concern about leadership stability affecting their contracts. The chess pieces were moving into position. But I needed one more element: the institutional investors who'd been silent partners in North Bend's growth. I called Patricia Winters at Meridian Capital. She managed North Bend's largest institutional position outside my family's control. "Ava, I've been expecting your call. The street is buzzing about Monday's emergency board meeting. Have you seen Brendan's television interview?" "Unfortunately, he couldn't explain your basic product architecture. My analysts were not impressed." "Patricia, what would happen to your position if North Bend lost its core technology advantage?" A pause. "We'd have to write down our entire investment. Why, check your email." I sent her Tessa's analysis showing the algorithmic dependencies, the vigilant licensing structure, and the revenue projections with and without our improvements. The subject line: "What Langford and Pike isn't telling you about their acquisition target." Her callback came in 3 minutes. "Is this verified? Every line of code, every contract clause, every revenue projection backed by signed LOIs? And the licensing terms: Vigilant maintains exclusive control unless North Bend maintains independent governance with a CEO approved by a supermajority of all share classes, not just Class B." Patricia laughed, sharp and knowing. "You've built a kill switch." "I've built accountability." "The technology that drives value stays with the company only if the company acts in good faith." "I need to make some calls. Don't make any moves before you hear from me." By 4:30 p.m., my phone was exploding. 3 institutional investors, 2 hedge funds, and a sovereign wealth fund all suddenly very interested in North Bend's governance. Gerald called 6 times. I didn't answer. Instead, I met with my core team in a conference room I'd booked at a hotel away from any North Bend surveillance. "They're panicking," Ivy reported, monitoring email traffic. "Victoria's been calling emergency PR meetings all afternoon." "Let them spin. We have something better than narrative. We have numbers." I pulled up the master document we'd been building. Every innovation, every line of code, every client relationship mapped to its true creator, not the person who claimed credit, but who actually did the work. Tessa had cross-referenced Git commits with board presentations. The pattern was damning. Every major innovation attributed to Brendan had been built by either me or Tessa. Every client relationship he'd claimed to manage showed my email threads doing the actual work. "It's forensic proof of systematic fraud," Noah said. "The SEC will have a field day." "We're not sending it to the SEC yet," I said. "First, we give the board a chance to do the right thing." "You think they will?" Ivy asked. "No, but when they don't, we'll have demonstrated good faith attempt at internal resolution. Makes the whistleblower complaint stronger." I drafted a letter to the board, copying every member except my parents. Professional, factual, devastating. "Gentle board members, I write to express concern about Monday's emergency meeting. Attached, please find documentation suggesting potential conflicts of interest in the proposed governance changes. Vigilant Care Systems stands ready to maintain its licensing partnership with North Bend under appropriate governance structures. However, any attempt to force a sale under the current circumstances will trigger immediate license termination per Section 7.3 of our agreement. I remain committed to North Bend's success and shareholder value maximization through ethical governance." Attached 40 pages of evidence, contracts, and projections. I hit send at 5:59 p.m. Noah's phone rang immediately, then Ivy's, then mine. The board members were calling their advisors, their lawyers, their investors. The quiet Friday afternoon had become a firestorm. Patricia Winters texted, "Emergency investor call scheduled for Sunday night. Be ready to present." Gerald's next call came at 6:15 p.m. This time, I answered. "What have you done?" His voice was controlled fury. "Exactly what you taught me, father. Protected value, maximized returns, executed strategy." "You're destroying everything we've built." "No, I'm documenting everything I've built. There's a difference. The board will never approve this structure. Then the board will have to explain to shareholders why they're rejecting $32 million in guaranteed revenue to pursue a conflicted sale at below-market valuations." Silence. Then, quieter. "You've declared war on your own family." You declared war when you laughed at my humiliation and sold my future for Brendan's ego. I'm just better armed. I hung up. Around the table, my team sat quietly, understanding the weight of what we'd just set in motion. Monday morning, I said, standing. 8 a.m. board meeting. They think they're voting on my termination and Brendan's elevation. Instead, they're going to vote on North Bend's survival. And if they vote wrong, Tessa asked. I smiled, cold as December. Then we build something better on the ashes. Vigilant Care Systems launches Tuesday with 12 flagship clients and the best technical team in healthcare analytics. The fortress was built. The weapons were loaded. Monday would determine whether North Bend lived or died. Either way, I would win. Sunday evening, 10:47 p.m. The grandfather clock in my study ticked like a countdown. Every document was printed, organized, tabbed with color-coded precision. The recording from the dinner sat in my bag, uploaded to 3 cloud servers and a lawyer's escrow account. Tomorrow would end everything one way or another. My phone screen showed 19 missed calls from Elaine, 12 from Gerald, 43 from Victoria Ames. Brendan hadn't called once. He probably didn't even understand what was happening. I sat in my kitchen, a glass of wine untouched, reviewing the orchestration one final time. 4 separate meetings had been scheduled before the board convened, each a deliberate pressure point. 7 a.m. Tessa would meet with the 3 independent board members, walking them through the technical dependencies. 7:15 a.m. Ivy would file the whistleblower complaint with the SEC, copying the board's insurance carrier. 7:30 a.m. Dr. Hart would send formal notices to North Bend about contract contingencies. 7:45 a.m. Noah would deliver the emergency injunction filing if they proceeded with the conflicted vote. My laptop chimed. An encrypted message from Patricia Winters. Institutional Investor Group met. Unanimous position. Any governance change without supermajority approval triggers immediate divestment. Letters will be on every board member's desk by 7 tomorrow morning. Another message. This one from Tom at AV. Thought you should know your parents hired a private investigator. He's been asking questions about your mental health history, trying to find therapists, medical records. Found nothing because there's nothing to find. They were desperate enough to violate HIPAA laws looking for ammunition. The fact that I'd never needed therapy despite their parenting was probably the greatest irony. At 11:30 p.m., Elaine broke protocol and showed up at my building. The doorman called up, uncertain. Send her away, I told him. I'm not receiving visitors. She says it's urgent. Ms. Calloway. Says she's your mother. I don't have a mother here, just someone who shares my last name. Through my window, I watched her leave 15 minutes later, her posture rigid with fury. She'd probably never been denied entry anywhere in her life. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but I recognized Victoria's style. You're destroying your family's legacy. Is your pride worth that? I typed back, you confused legacy with liability. And yes, at 1:23 a.m., something unexpected in email from Brendan. The subject line, I know what you're doing. Ava, I'm not stupid, despite what you think. I know Mom and Dad are using me. I've always known. But I also know I'll never be what you are. I'll take the title and the salary and the pretense because it's all I'm good for. You build things. I just inherit them. At least let me inherit something. Don't destroy it all just to prove you can. B. For a moment, I felt something crack in my chest. Then I remembered him laughing at the dinner, making his chromosome joke while they auctioned my future. I didn't reply. At 2 a.m., I opened my safe and pulled out a folder I'd kept for 8 years. Performance reviews I'd written for team members Gerald had wanted fired because they didn't fit the culture. Emails where I'd fought for fair bonuses that Elaine had called excessive for support staff. Resignation letters I'd talked people out of sending when my parents' management style had pushed them to the breaking point. Every person I'd protected over the years. Tessa, Ivy, Tom, even Noah, who'd been told his pro bono work made him uncommitted to profit. They'd all remembered. They were all here now, ready to fight beside me. At 3 a.m., I finally tried to sleep, but my mind kept running scenarios. They could call my bluff, vote to terminate me anyway, dare me to destroy the company. Would I? Could I pull the trigger that would eliminate hundreds of jobs to punish the guilty few? Yes, because those hundreds of jobs were already at risk under Langford and Pike's ownership. At least with Vigilant, I could hire the best of them. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep, showered, and dressed in my sharpest suit black with a white silk shirt, the kind of outfit you'd wear to a funeral or a coronation, depending on your perspective. I stood at my mirror, applying lipstick the color of blood, and saw my mother's face in my features. The same sharp cheekbones, the same calculating eyes. She'd given me her face and her ruthlessness. The difference was, I used mine to build rather than tear down. Usually, at 6:15 a.m., I arrived at North Bend's building. The security guard, Marcus, nodded respectfully. "Big day, Ms. Calloway." "The biggest, Marcus. My money's on you. Always has been." I took the elevator to the executive floor. The boardroom was still dark, but I could see the materials already laid out at each seat. Someone, probably Victoria, had prepared information packets. I didn't need to look. I knew they were character assassinations disguised as governance documents. I went to my office and found Ivy already there, whistleblower complaint in hand. "Ready?" she asked. "Since I was 7 years old," I replied. Tessa arrived with her laptop and a presentation remote. The independent board members agreed to see me. They seem concerned about the implications. Noah appeared in my doorway at 6:45 a.m. "The injunction is ready. One word from you and I file. Hold until 7:45. Let them think they're in control right up until they're not. Dr. Hart called, letters sent, copying the Wall Street Journal's healthcare reporter, as discussed." I pulled out the recording device, checked the batteries, tested the playback. Gerald's voice filled my office. "Ava will continue supporting from her operational position. It's where she excels." Everything was loaded. Every weapon was primed. At 7:55 a.m., I stood, gathered my materials, and looked at my team. "Whatever happens in there, we've already won. We've proven what we built, who built it, and what it's worth. The rest is just paperwork." I walked toward the boardroom, my heels marking time against marble. Behind the closed doors, I could hear voices heated, worried, some angry. I put my hand on the door handle, took one breath, and thought of every moment that had led here. Every dismissal, every humiliation, every stolen credit and casual cruelty. They wanted a CEO. Time to show them one. The boardroom doors opened to 12 faces arranged around polished mahogany. Gerald sat at the head, Elaine to his right, Brendan fidgeting beside her. The independent directors looked exhausted. Patricia Winters had clearly made her calls. Langford and Pike themselves were present, which meant they'd flown in from New York overnight. "Ava," Gerald's voice carried manufactured disappointment. "Despite your recent erratic behavior, we're prepared to offer you a graceful exit, severance, references, even a consulting arrangement. I decline." I set my materials at the empty seat, not at the table's end where they'd relegated me, but in the middle, directly across from him. "Shall we address the actual agenda? The attempted sale of North Bend to Langford and Pike at 40% below market value." "That's a serious accusation," Langford interjected. "It's a serious crime." I opened my folder. "Securities fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conspiracy to manipulate stock value. Would you like to hear the recording from your dinner where you discussed the plan? Or should we start with the emails between Victoria Ames and your firm dated 3 weeks before?" The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Gerald stood. "As chairman, I'm calling for an immediate vote on leadership transition." "Actually," Patricia Winters interrupted, "you can't." As of 7:15 this morning, the Institutional Investor Group filed an emergency motion requiring supermajority approval for any governance changes. You need 75% of all share classes, not just your rigged Class B majority. I pulled out the recording device. Let's help everyone understand what we're really voting on. Gerald's voice filled the room. By next quarter, Brendan will assume the CEO role. Ava will continue supporting from her operational position. It's where she excels. Then Brendan's voice. Ava's brilliant with KPIs and process optimization, but strategic vision that requires a different chromosome. The laughter that followed sounded obscene in the boardroom's silence. There's more, I said, cueing the next section. Victoria's voice, talking to my parents, and Langford. Once Ava is deemed unstable, the drag-along triggers. 40% discount for quick sale. Brendan as figurehead CEO. Everyone wins. That's taken out of context, Elaine started. Then let's discuss context. Noah entered, right on time. The SEC has been notified of potential securities fraud. The Delaware Chancery Court has an emergency injunction ready if this board proceeds with any vote under conflicted circumstances. And 12 hospital systems have indicated they'll terminate contracts if leadership changes affect their service quality. Ivy stepped in behind him. Compliance has documented 17 instances of governance violations, all traceable to coordinated action between the Callaway Family Fund and Langford and Pike. Dr. Hart appeared on the conference screen. My hospital network is prepared to sign immediately with Vigilant Care Systems if North Bend proceeds with this tainted vote. $32 million in revenue, walking out the door. Gerald's face had gone from red to white. You can't simply, I can? I stood, walked to the presentation screen. Tessa. She pulled up the technical architecture. Every algorithm improvement from the last 18 months runs through Vigilant's IP. Without it, North Bend's competitive advantage disappears. The license continues only under independent governance. This is extortion, Elaine hissed. This is capitalism. You taught me that. I turned to the independent board members. You have two choices. Vote for this conflicted transaction and watch the company implode, or vote for legitimate governance and preserve value. What are you proposing? Asked Margaret Stone, the longest-serving independent director. I clicked to my final slide. Remove conflicted board members, Gerald, Elaine, and any directors with ties to Langford and Pike. Appoint independent governance. Ratify me as CEO based on performance metrics, not nepotism. This is our company, Gerald roared. No, it's the shareholders' company. And I've delivered 800% return on their investment while you've been planning to steal 40% of its value. The room erupted. Langford threatening litigation, Pike making phone calls, Victoria frantically typing on her phone, but the independent directors were huddling, whispering, calculating. Margaret Stone called for order. We need to vote. All in favor of removing conflicted board members and preventing the proposed transaction. One by one, hands raised. The institutional investors' representatives unanimous yes. The independent directors yes. 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 Doctor, Hart on screen, yes. Even two of Gerald's supposed allies, faced with evidence of fraud, voted yes. All opposed. Gerald raised his hand. Elaine followed, Langford and Pike, futile but defiant. Brendan sat frozen, his hand halfway up, then slowly lowered it. Abstain, he whispered. Motion carries. Gerald and Elaine Callaway are removed from the board, effective immediately. The proposed transaction with Langford and Pike is terminated. Margaret looked at me. The board will now vote on confirming Ava Callaway as Chief Executive Officer. The vote was swift. 11 in favor, 0 opposed, 3 abstentions Brendan and 2 directors who'd already fled the room. I signed the confirmation papers, my signature steady and final. Then I looked directly at my parents, former board members now. Nothing more. You always wanted a CEO done right. Here's the CEO the market chose. Gerald's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in my life, he had no words. Elaine stood, gathering her things with shaking hands. You've destroyed your family. No, I've saved my company. The family was already destroyed. You did that at dinner with your laughter? They left without another word, Brendan trailing behind them like a lost shadow. Langford and Pike followed, already on their phones with lawyers. The boardroom emptied until only my team remained. Tessa, Ivy, Noah, and on screen, Dr. Hart. The people who'd stood with me when standing meant risking everything. So, Tessa said quietly, you're CEO now. What's your first directive? I looked out the window at Denver spreading below, then back at the people who'd become my real family. We build. We innovate. We deliver value to shareholders and health outcomes to patients, and we do it with integrity. I smiled, not sharp anymore, just satisfied. Everything they said I couldn't be. We're going to be all of that, and more. The morning sun filled the boardroom with light. Somewhere in this city, my parents were probably raging, planning their next move. Victoria Ames was certainly spinning damage control, but in this room, in this moment, we'd won. Not with cruelty or manipulation, but with truth, evidence, and the fundamental principle Gerald had taught me but never followed himself. Value creation beats value extraction. Every time. I was CEO, not because of my last name, not despite it, but because I'd earned it in the furnace of their contempt. They'd wanted to create a CEO in their image. Instead, they'd forged their own replacement. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and triumph. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed Ava's journey from humiliation to vindication, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in her position? Let me know in the comments.